принципе, это все стартапы, которые сегодня презентовались. Давайте еще раз им подарим аплодисменты. Можно свет включить? Кто выиграл и кто получит какие места, мы узнаем после того, как мы проведем такую онлайн-сессию с нашим другом из Лондона. А он на паузе? Hey. Друзья, давайте поприветствуем. Это Eamonn, Carey, это TECHSTARS из Лондона. Он сегодня на связи с нами и будет говорить про перспективы международных рынков в сфере AI. Eamonn, please welcome.
Thank you. Spasiba. Starts with you. Меня зовут Eamonn Carey. Unfortunately, that is all of the Russian that I know. I'm going to tell you, let me share my screen here so that I can give you some information on what I do. Now, so hopefully you can all see my screen here. I'm going to give you some tips to avoid making a mess of fundraising, avoiding fundraising fuck-ups, basically. So this is me on Twitter and almost every other social media channel, so if you want to follow me or send me messages or get in touch, please do. And my email address is at the end of the presentation. So to get started, this is what everyone wants when they start a company. Numbers, whether it be user numbers or revenue numbers, to go up over a very short period of time. Now, it doesn't always happen. The reality is you get covered by the media and you get lots of users, and then the novelty wears off and you go through a trough of sorrow where you try and figure out, does anyone really want your product, and you try and do some releases and improve things and get some false hope and ruin things because of silliness, and there are a whole bunch of different things that go on throughout your process of building and scaling a company. And it's tough, you know, not every startup makes it through, and not every startup succeeds, but hopefully the tips that I'll give you over the next kind of 20 minutes or so will give you at least a step up when it comes to raising capital for your business, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about that. The interesting point is this is an incredible time to be starting new companies, particularly in the AI, machine learning and computer vision space. This is the very first website that went up at CERN about 24 years ago. When you think about the amount of value that's been created in the internet ecosystem in 24 years, or the amount of value that's been created in the mobile ecosystem in the 10 years since the iOS and Android app and Play stores came into being, or the amount of value that's been created in a short period of time since blockchain and crypto became a thing. You know, we're still in the very early stages of value creation in machine learning and artificial intelligence, so huge opportunities to grow and scale and do interesting things. So how do I know this? So I'm the managing director at TECHSTARS London, and I'll talk a little bit about TECHSTARS generally, but at the end of the presentation, that's where I'll do my pitch. At TECHSTARS London, we've invested in over 62 companies over the last 5 years, and that's been everything from people making healthy juice drinks to social media sites, artificial intelligence and machine learning companies across almost every sector, from fintech to ad tech and all points in between. I've invested and sit on the board of a whole bunch of artificial intelligence and machine learning companies, including Linguist, which is an AI-powered language learning tool from Estonia. I'm a venture partner with Zeroth, which is an AI-driven accelerator in Hong Kong. And so I have a pretty good overview of the market and have watched a lot of fundraising rounds over the last few years. So let's talk a little bit about raising funding and the process that you've got to go through and some of the things that you should be aware of when you're going through that process. And hopefully some of the investors and VCs in the room will laugh at some of this. If you catch them shaking their heads, it's because they see it way too frequently. So the path from zero to raising money has a lot of potential pitfalls along the way. And I'm just going to talk you through some of the ones that we see most regularly. So not every company should raise capital. There is this assumption that raising money is a great thing for your business and it's a great sign of success. Not every company should. There are a lot of companies that can scale and grow and do amazing things through revenue, through cash flow, through traditional measures such as bank debt, etc. So raising venture capital is not for everyone, and it's not something that every company should consider. It can be like jet fuel for your business, and it can help really accelerate it. It can also be like covering your business in jet fuel and setting fire to it. So you've got to balance those two things out. So not every company should raise is the first thing I should say. Some things to think about. Timing is really important. So the idea that you can start fundraising at any point during the year is one that we've seen is not true over the last few years. So typically there are some good times of year to start meeting people, to start trying to close deals, and there are some very bad times of year as well. So usually the first couple of weeks of January are pretty bad. Really, most of the summer, July and August, a lot of venture capital folks tend to take vacation or set their autoresponders to on. And again, late in the year, in December, a lot of people disappear. So the timing around which you start your fundraise and around which you plan your fundraise is really important. And so if you're starting fundraising in June and thinking that you're going to close the round in August, you might need to reassess that and rethink kind of your burn rates and more to figure out whether or not that's going to be the case. Also, you need to have certain things in place, some of which we'll talk to over the next few slides. But you need to go through a due diligence process with a lot of investors, where they'll want to see certificates of incorporation or IP agreements or lawyers in place or presentation decks and all of these details. So you've got to have your presentations and your ducks in a row to actually be ready to go out and fundraise. This is one that we see companies making mistakes on very frequently, thinking that you can it's easy to raise and you'll be able to close the fundraising round in a short period of time. If only that were the case. To be very honest, it frequently takes a little bit longer than 6 weeks. We usually say to companies, really, from your first meeting to the time that the money goes into your bank account can be anything from 3 months if you're lucky to 6 months if you're unlucky. So just be aware that the timing can take longer than you think. All investors are created equal. Well, that's simply not the case. There are lots of different types of investors, angels, VCs, people who have experience, people who have capital, and you need to be careful about the type of people that you work with and the type of people that you allow to put money into your company, because you're going to be stuck with them for a very long time. In many cases, companies take 10 years to get to an IPO, and you want to make sure that you have the right people working with you and on your board and involved in your company, right? Because ultimately what you want is smart money. You want good people with experience and knowledge and ability and a network that they can open up for you. And that smart money can be incredibly valuable to companies, almost as valuable as anything that they do or work on themselves. What you want to avoid is dumb money, money that doesn't add any value, money that doesn't add any network, investors who don't understand how startups work and will, hassle you and harass you and look for their money back as quickly as possible and make life difficult for you. So just be careful about the people that you bring into your company, that you bring onto your cap table and that you bring on board as investors. And this is something I wrote for TechCrunch a little while ago about, really for startups. as investors, we do due diligence on you and look into your background and what you're doing and examine the technology and understand how that works and get some people to really dig in and see if what you're working on is real. I think as startups, you need to do your due diligence on investors as well and make sure that they're good people and that they're helpful. And, I think, doing some reference checks and so forth is always a good thing to do. Big name VCs are awesome, and this is true. It's great if you can get some, celebrity venture capital firm to invest in your company, and again, they can open a lot of doors. They can be very smart investors and smart money in. The reality is, though, for most investors, particularly on the West Coast in the US and to an extent on the East Coast and in Europe and elsewhere in the world, the vast majority of the money that they deploy will be deployed within 50 miles of where they are. Right, so less than 18% of the money that most big VCs will put into companies will go into companies that are outside the city limits of where they are. And I see a lot of companies make this mistake of, getting on a plane and going and meeting venture capitalists in far-flung places to try and raise capital. And the reality is, if you want to raise in San Francisco in particular, they're going to expect you to go there. So just be aware, particularly at an early stage, investors like investing in businesses where they can, actually see you. They can go to your office, they can spend time with you, and that's a good sign, right? They want to add value to your business. So I think that's just something to bear in mind. This is an important one, and again, I see companies do this all the time, where they start the fundraising process and don't think about how much money they're going to need to raise. So it's important when you're going into meetings with angels or VC investors to be able to say to them, this is how much money I want. I want $500,000 or I want $1 million. And you have to be able to back that up. You need to think about why you need that money and how you're going to break down what you're going to do with it. So I think for me, one of the key things is, thinking about how much capital you need for the next 18 months of your business. So plan out what your salary is going to be, what your overheads are going to be in terms of servers, in terms of staff, in terms of office space, etc. How much it's going to cost to hire the additional people that you need to grow and scale, and plan that for 18 months. Most VCs and investors will invest in you on the basis of 18 months of runway. And what they're trying to do there is give you enough time to try the business, hopefully get to product market fit and raise your next round of funding. But 18 months is also long enough so that if things don't work out, there's enough time for you to pivot or try another business model or a variation on what you're doing. It's frequently actually a very bad thing to go into a VC meeting or an investor meeting and not know how much money you need. It makes you look amateur, like you haven't fully thought through the process. So map out what you need for 18 months. You can always ask for a little bit more, but once you have that rationale of that cost breakdown of what you need different pieces of that money for, I think that's the key thing. The assumption that you can just email people, cold emails don't really work particularly well. This is a friend of mine who says his preferred way to connect with him either by text, Twitter, email, phone, climbing through his window, or LinkedIn. So I think if you're connecting with people, one of the best things that you can do is get a referral. So if you want to talk to an investor, one of the best people to get an introduction from is someone they've already invested in. If you want to talk to someone at TECHSTARS, we have a huge range of portfolio companies we've invested in previously and people that we've helped. So, getting referrals, getting connections, using your network to get access to people is key. Sending a cold email, you're probably just going to end up in either a spam filter or just forgotten about. So I think don't assume that you can just send emails and get meetings. Also, investors like hot deals. We're kind of herd animals. You don't want to miss out on something. And so companies that get lots of media coverage or that get lots of buzz or that are referred in by other investors, frequently they're the ones that get the most attention. So, if you have lots of clients and partners, or a really exciting piece of technology that you have, some patents on and some media coverage about it, that's going to make it a lot easier for you to get those meetings and to close those meetings. So, making sure that you have some momentum when you're talking to investors is key. You have to talk to lots of people. As they say in romance novels, you have to kiss a lot of frogs. So you can't just talk to a small number of investors and close a deal. The data shows us that usually, if you want to close a deal, you need to talk to at least 40 or 50 investors. And they don't have a lot of very long attention span. So when investors are looking at presentations or decks, it's usually for about 3 or 4 minutes. So you've got to have something that really grabs them, and that's again, having some news or partnership or revenue number or some big number that you can tell them. That gets people's attention and gives them a little bit more time to spend on your decks. But you should really be thinking of every fundraising round will involve talking to somewhere between 50 and 100 outbound connection requests or emails or more. You'll then get some meetings, and then maybe only 2 or 3 of the investors that you meet will end up investing. So you have to kiss a lot of frogs. You have to talk to a lot of people. And getting the presentation that you send right is key. So this is just some data from DocSend, who are probably one of the biggest suppliers of tools for companies that are sharing presentations. And what they've seen is, the slides in a presentation deck that get the most attention from VCs and from investors are the product, the team, and the competition slides. So I think those are ones that you really need to think about. I think having your 10-slide presentation deck is really important, but paying attention to showing the product and making sure you get across what it is and what it does. The team is really one of the most important things, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. And showing some of the competition or some of the other people who are in the space that you're going to go up against is very important. And just for context, this is a tool called Streak that a lot of our portfolio companies use, and this just shows leads, meetings scheduled, pitches, people who've made a commitment, and people who've actually then signed letters saying they'll invest. So you can see there's, it's a huge amount of leads, 43 leads to 15 hard commitments. So you've got to, again, get out, you've got to do a lot of meetings, you've got to talk to a lot of people, you've got to get a lot of referrals, because it is, can be quite a long process and quite a tough one. This is the other mistake I see people make all the time, assuming that you're just going for a coffee or a drink with an investor and that it's very casual. Usually it's not. If you're meeting them, they're meeting you to find out how the company is going, and maybe you'll develop a personal relationship over time, but every time you go for a coffee with them, they're looking for a signal, or they're trying to figure out if anything has changed and if they're going to change their mind about investing in your business. So even the most casual relationship that you have with people, there is always some investment motive in their minds. When investors say that they're in, it doesn't necessarily always mean that they're in. It doesn't mean that they're going to definitely give you the money. So what you need is, investors are not in until they have committed their interest and confirmed their interest with a clear yes in writing or by email. And even then, we see probably 10% of investors, maybe 15% of investors who get to a term sheet, sign that, and then just don't wire the money. So unless investors tell you a very clear yes, always assume that there's some hurdle you have yet to overcome. Valuations are very important for a bunch of different reasons, but once you figure out the amount of money that you're raising, the valuation starts to become a lot clearer. And here's why. This is, data over thousands of fundraising data sets that have been gathered by Capshare over the last few years. So most rounds of funding that you do for your company, you'll give away between 15 and 25% of the equity. And so you can use that to say, well, if you're raising $1 million, then the valuation of your company after that fundraising process is going to be, roughly $5 million. So this just shows you that once you pick the amount that you're raising, the kind of valuation of your company starts to become a lot clearer. Now, as you get further into fundraising processes, you can start giving away less of your company, particularly if you're kind of a big company that's scaling very rapidly. But typically in the early stages, we tend to tell people to expect to give away about 20%. Anyone will do for the lead. This isn't true. Again, make sure that the investor you bring in as your lead is great and helpful and useful. It's like getting married to someone. You're going to be stuck with them on your board for a long time. You want to make sure that you actually like them. So make sure your lead investor is a good person and someone you enjoy spending time with. You don't necessarily need term sheets from VCs in the early stages of the process. It helps if you can get them. But what you need are emails with commitments, or emails at least with a commitment that says, I will give you $100,000 if you achieve this metric, or if you achieve this goal. So if you can get that type of commitment, that's extremely valuable, and you can then bring that to other investors and let them know that you have that commitment from an investor. One thing to think about it as well is everyone assumes that raising funding won't get in the way of running a business. The reality is that it will. Right, it will take up 95% of your time. It is a very time-consuming endeavor of meetings and telephone calls and emails and presentations and changes and more. So just be prepared for the fact that it will take over your life for quite a chunk of time. And so making sure that you have a team in place that can manage that and manage the business while you're away is extremely important. And if you're lucky and everything goes according to plan, then you can celebrate and you can have an amazing time. And then it's back to work to actually grow and scale your company. So it's not easy, but hopefully some tips there that will help you out. For me, I think raising money is not necessarily success. It's not a milestone for a company. It's a way of generating those milestones in the future. So I think a lot of companies look at fundraising as being a metric for success, but actually there are more fundamental things in your business to think about. And it's important to have a backup plan. If you can't raise funding, what do you do? How do you maintain the business, or what's your plan B? Because ultimately, if we look at the number of companies that go from seed to Series A, it's less than 30% of companies will get there, maybe less than 20%. And there will be similar drop-offs over time. So, even raising a Series A or Series B round of funding doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be successful. So having a backup plan is important. Some quick tips. Don't ever say that there's no competition. There is always a competition for your business. It might not be direct, it might be indirect, or it might be a comparative company that you can point to. Be wary of what they call tranched investments, where someone will say, I'll give you $1 million, but I'll give it to you in 5 batches of 200K, and you have to hit these milestones for me to give you that money. I've seen that lead to a lot of problems in the past. Don't ask investors to sign a non-disclosure agreement. We won't, because we see too many deals and it would be legally impossible. If you're building an AI and machine learning company, be ready to back up that fact in due diligence. I meet a lot of companies who say that they're building AI and it's 2 guys with an MBA and they own a Nintendo and that's the only computer experience they have. Watch out for jargon. That's always, not everyone is as intelligent as the founders of companies. And don't lie. You'd be amazed how often I get told the company has 100,000 users, and then you go and look at their Google Analytics and it's closer to 100. So some little things to avoid there. Before I finish, very quickly, let me tell you a little bit about TECHSTARS and what we do. So TECHSTARS is a worldwide network that helps entrepreneurs succeed. We run accelerator programs around the world. We have a venture fund that invests in businesses as well. It's a 3-month bootcamp program, so we connect you with lots of mentors who engage with you, give you feedback, connect you with people, help you kind of execute and iterate on your product, and prepare you then for fundraising after that part. We invest $120,000 into the company. There's lots of perks and benefits and packages I can tell you more about We are stage agnostic, so any type of company, any type of size team, any type of stage. Usually it's companies of 5 to 7 people who've raised, $500,000 to $1 million. We really over-index on the team. The most important thing for us is making sure that you have an amazing team that complements one another, that has the right skills, and then we look at the market, the progress you've made, and the idea that you have. And if you're interested in applying, I can tell you more. My email address is in a minute, but just the applications for our program are open at the moment. Lots of our companies raise follow-on rounds of funding. So far, we've invested in 1,274 companies who've raised over $4.4 billion in funding and have a market cap of almost $12 billion. So we've been doing it across the world for a long time and love working with intelligent people and amazing companies that, particularly in my case, really interested in AI and machine learning. And so if you're interested in learning more, you can go to apply.techstars.com. It'll tell you a little bit about our program. Again, this is me on Twitter and elsewhere, and this is my email address. And I think the guys can share my details if you want to get in touch. But thank you for your patience. Hopefully my Irish accent was easy to understand, although I doubt it. And hopefully we'll get to talk or email sometime soon.